CEO crashed her car into a single dad. His calm response left her breathless. She hit his car at 7:42 a.m. on a Tuesday, and her first move was to call her attorney. Elena Voss stepped out of her Audi in a Tahari blazer and heels she'd already worn for 2 hours, phone already at her ear before she'd assessed the damage. She was late for a board presentation. She was always late. She had staff to prevent lateness, and it still happened. And now there was a dented bumper in a school drop-off lane and a man she'd never seen before, standing beside a 10-year-old Ford that had seen better years. Behind them, 4 cars had stopped. A crossing guard in an orange vest was watching. 3 parents on the sidewalk had their phones out, not calling anyone. Just holding them the way people hold phones when something interesting is happening that might become shareable. Elena's attorney went to voicemail. She lowered the phone. The man beside the Ford had not moved toward her or away from her. He was looking at the damage. Rear left panel, his. Front right, hers. He ran a hand over the crease in his bumper, with the calm assessment of someone who has just been told a difficult fact and is deciding what it means. He was in a jacket that had a small paint stain on the left sleeve. His daughter, a girl of maybe 7 or 8, dark braids, backpack sized for someone twice her, was watching the whole scene from behind him with the self-possessed seriousness of a child who had decided to observe rather than react. He looked up. "You all right?" he said. Elena stared at him. She had just hit his car. He was asking if she was all right. She had been running at full speed for 11 hours, and she had not slept well, and her board presentation was in 40 minutes, and the front panel of her $90,000 car was caved in. And this man whose 10-year-old Ford she had just dented in a school drop-off lane in front of 5 witnesses and a crossing guard, this man was asking if she was all right. She did not know what to do with that. What Elena Voss did not know, standing in that drop-off lane with her heels on the asphalt and her attorney in voicemail, was that the man in front of her had once talked someone down from a ledge. Not metaphorically. An actual ledge. On an actual bridge 11 years ago, before he'd left his job as a crisis counselor to raise his daughter after her mother died. What she didn't know was that his name was Cal Merritt, and that his calm was not passivity or weakness, and that it was going to cost her something she hadn't budgeted for. The particular discomfort of being seen by someone who wasn't afraid of her. By end of the week, her chief of staff, Marcus Hale, who was already composing a cover story in the back of his Escalade 4 blocks away, would be out of a job. The incident report he'd tried to suppress would be in the hands of her board. And Elena Voss, who had not eaten breakfast sitting down in 4 months, was going to find herself at a kitchen table with a 7-year-old explaining the structural integrity of scrambled eggs. But first, she had to get through this parking lot. And the man across from her was still waiting for an answer. Cal Merritt had woken at 5:50 that morning to the sound of Nora already up. This was not unusual. Nora ran on her own schedule, an internal clock calibrated to approximately 30 minutes before anyone else needed to be conscious. He'd learned, after 7 years, to treat this as useful information rather than a problem. By the time he got to the kitchen, she had fed herself a bowl of cereal, found her library book, and was sitting at the table reading with the focused contentment of someone who had been an early riser in every previous life too. "Morning," he said. She turned a page. "Your coffee timer went off twice." "I know. I was letting it sit." "You always let it sit too long." "That's how I like it." She considered this. "That seems wrong," she said, and went back to her book. This was Nora. 7 years old, 2nd grade, Specific opinions about most things, generous with none of them. She had her mother's dark eyes and her father's habit of going quiet when something mattered too much for ordinary language. Cal had learned, in the 3 years since Jess died, to read her silences the way you read tide charts, not with alarm, just attention. He made the coffee, poured it, drank it the way he liked it, which Nora found structurally wrong and he found fine. He was not a man who moved fast in the mornings. He had been once 10 years ago when crisis counseling required a different kind of readiness, when his phone could go at midnight and he had to be coherent in 6 minutes. He didn't do that work anymore. He'd left it deliberately, 2 years before Jess's diagnosis, because the hours and the emotional weight had started following him home. And then the home situation had required everything he had, and then some. He did contract handyman work now, 3 regular clients, flexible hours, enough to keep the lights on and pick Nora up at 3:15. It wasn't the career he'd built. It was the life he'd chosen, and most mornings that felt like the same thing. He packed Nora's lunch, ham and cheese, apple slices, the small bag of pretzels she ate first and denied eating. Left a note tucked inside. Proud of you. Not for anything specific, just in general, Dad. He'd been leaving that note in various forms since first grade. She never mentioned it. He had found one once, folded into a small square in the pocket of her winter coat, which was all the information he needed. They drove to school at the usual time. Nora sat in the back seat with her library book and did not narrate the drive, which meant she was thinking about something she hadn't decided to share yet. He didn't push it. She'd tell him when she was ready, or she wouldn't. And either was her right. The school drop-off lane was its usual mild chaos. 4 cars deep, a crossing guard in orange, parents in varying states of morning readiness. He pulled in behind a white Audi. Nora gathered her things with the systematic deliberateness of someone who had been told several times not to forget things and had decided organization was preferable to consequences. "You've got your library book?" he said. "Yes." "Returned it?" A pause. "I'm returning it today." "It was due Monday." "I know." "Nora." "I know, Dad." She zipped her backpack. "I'll apologize to Mrs. Kim." "Good." She leaned forward and patted his shoulder twice, her version of goodbye, efficient and warm, and reached for the door handle. That was when the white Audi reversed. He didn't have time to do much. He saw brake lights that didn't brake, felt the impact through the whole frame of the car, not violent, not enough to move either vehicle significantly, but solid and unambiguous. Nora lurched forward into her seatbelt. He had his hand across her before he decided to. "I'm okay," she said immediately, in the tone of someone who had been preparing this answer. "Stay still a second." She stayed still. He looked at her face. No sign of impact, eyes clear, more interested in what had just happened than distressed by it. He checked the dashboard, checked the angle. Both cars had barely moved. The damage was cosmetic, rear bumper, hers into his. He got out. He had assessed the damage and was running his hand along the crease when she stepped out of the Audi. Phone up, already talking. Or trying to. He watched her face as the call went to voicemail. Watched the recalibration, the slight adjustment that happened when a person accustomed to instant professional response hit a moment where there was no one to delegate to. She was in her early 40s, sharp-featured, the kind of composed that was a deliberate posture rather than a resting state. She hadn't looked at the damage yet. She was looking at her phone. Then she looked at him. He asked if she was all right. She stared at him. He had seen that stare before, not on her specifically, but in a general type. People who had spent long enough being the most powerful person in every room that an unexpected reversal of expected behavior short-circuited their response. He'd seen it in hospital waiting rooms, in corporate offices he'd done repair work in the brief window after something loud and sudden when the practiced self drops away for just a moment. Yes, she said. Are you? We're fine. He nodded toward Nora, who had gotten out and positioned herself beside the car with her backpack and her library book, watching the exchange with the focused attention of a documentary filmmaker. My daughter's okay. Elena looked at Nora. Nora looked back, unblinking. I'm sorry, Elena said. It came out like something she'd practiced saying but hadn't said recently. I saw, he said. Blind spot, probably. She blinked. I should have. It happens. He looked at the bumpers again. Your front panel's going to need work. Mine is cosmetic, but I'll want to document it. Of course. She'd found her professional footing again. Slightly, the voice steadier. I'll give you my insurance. You'll be fully covered. I can have my assistant arrange. I can handle it, he said. Not cold, just clear. She stopped. He had the sense she wasn't often interrupted, even gently. He took out his phone and photographed the damage, her plate, his plate, the point of contact, the surrounding lane. Systematic, efficient. Not angry. Not performing anything, just doing what the situation required. She watched him do it. There was a small crowd now. The crossing guard had come over. 3 parents had stopped walking. A woman he recognized vaguely from the school's parent board was watching from the sidewalk with the specific attention of someone filing information for later use. Elena's phone rang. She looked at it. The name on the screen was Marcus. She answered. I just heard, are you all right? A man's voice, brisk and managed. I'm 4 blocks out. I can be there in 2 minutes. I'm fine. Good. Don't say anything else to anyone until I get there. I'll handle the documentation. Cal, close enough to hear, looked up from his phone. Elena caught his eye. Something crossed her face, a flicker of something she didn't name, and then she said quietly into the phone, I'm already handling it. I'll see you at the office. She hung up before Marcus Hale could respond. Cal looked at her for a moment. Your assistants, he said. Chief of Staff. She looked at the phone, then put it in her jacket pocket. He's very efficient. I'm sure. I didn't give him the chance to. I wasn't going to let him. She stopped. She was explaining herself, which she hadn't planned on. I just hit your car. I'd like to deal with that directly. Something shifted in his expression, not dramatically. A slight settling, the way a room settles when the temperature becomes what it should be. That's fine, he said. Cal Merritt. He offered his hand. Elena Voss. She shook it, firm, brief. The Voss Group, he said. Yes. He nodded, not impressed, not intimidated, just filing the information. She found that slightly unnerving and couldn't immediately explain why. The crossing guard materialized beside them. A woman in her 60s named Gloria, who Cal apparently knew by name because he said morning. Gloria with the ease of someone who had been doing this drop-off for long enough to have relationships with the crossing guards. Everyone okay? Gloria said. Fine, Cal said. Minor impact. We're sorting it out. Gloria looked at the bumpers, looked at Elena, looked at Nora. You've got 3 more minutes before the bell, she said to Nora. Nora considered this information. I also have a library book to return and an apology to give to Mrs. Kim, she announced, to no one in particular. Best get to it, Gloria said. Nora looked at her father. He gave a small nod. She walked toward the school entrance with the purposeful stride of someone who had responsibilities and was meeting them. She did not look back, which meant she trusted him completely, which was the kind of thing that quietly reorganized a person's understanding of what mattered. Elena watched her go. "She's very composed," Elena said. "She's had to be," he said simply. He did not elaborate. He looked back at his phone screen, finished entering her insurance information into his notes app. "I'll send you the estimate when I have it. Should be a few days." "Of course," she paused. "I'm sorry again. About the car and about I would have let Marcus." She stopped again, shook her head slightly. "I usually let people handle things for me." He looked at her with a directness that wasn't rude, but wasn't deferential either. "I noticed," he said. He said it the same way he'd said everything. No edge, no judgment. Just plainly. The way you'd note the weather. She was not accustomed to that. He put his phone away, gave the bumpers one more look, and went back around to the driver's side. He looked at her over the roof of the car. "Drive safe," he said. And he drove away. What Cal didn't know, what he wouldn't find out for 2 more days, was that Marcus Hale was already on his phone, calling in a favor from a contact at the city's traffic management office, pulling the intersection footage, having a conversation about the dashboard camera in Elena's car that had been running the entire time. What Cal Merritt also didn't know was that Marcus Hale had done this before. 3 times in 5 years. And that the board of the Voss Group had a compliance file with his name on it that was 2 entries short of the threshold that would require action. It was about to get a 3rd entry. Elena Voss had run the Voss Group for 9 years. She had not in 9 years eaten breakfast sitting down on a weekday. She did not have a commute that involved school drop-off lanes. She had a driver and a standing coffee order and a calendar managed by 2 assistants and a chief of staff whose entire job was to make the world between her and whatever it contained as frictionless as possible. She had not expected a dented bumper to be the most honest thing that happened to her on a Tuesday. She sat in her office at 9:15. The board presentation was done, the adrenaline was fading, and opened her calendar. 3 more back-to-backs before noon. A working lunch that wasn't lunch. A 4 o'clock that had been on the books so long she'd forgotten its original purpose. Her phone showed 1 unread text from Marcus. "Incident documentation handled. No press exposure. You're clear." She looked at the text for a long time. Then she opened her contacts. Cal Merritt had texted her his information from the parking lot. Name, phone number, a link to a note with the insurance details. She read it. He'd written it the way he'd done everything else at the scene, efficiently, completely, without drama. She typed, "Wanted to check in. How is your daughter?" She stared at the message, deleted it, typed it again, sent it before she could decide not to. His response came 20 minutes later. "She's good. Told her teacher about it at show and tell. Apparently, it was the most interesting Tuesday anyone's had." Elena read this twice, then a 3rd time. She typed back, "That sounds about right." She put the phone face down on the desk and went back to her calendar. She did not know yet what Marcus had done about the footage. She found out 2 days later. Marcus Hale had been Elena's chief of staff for 6 years. He was 44, well-networked, excellent at solving problems she didn't want to know the details of. He had the polished opacity of someone who had decided early that the best version of himself was a function, not a person. He made things disappear. Traffic incident footage, a vendor complaint filed by a contractor who'd been underpaid, a sourced quote in a trade article that reflected badly on the Voss Group's supply chain practices. These things went away. No one asked how, Elena had not asked how. That was the arrangement. He managed, she led. The floor between them had always been, "Don't make me know." She found out on Thursday morning when her general counsel, Priya Anand, walked into her office at 7:55, closed the door, and set a printed document on the desk. "I need you to read this," Priya said, "before Marcus gets in." Elena read it. It was a summary of communications Marcus had made in the 48 hours after the accident. 3 phone calls to the traffic management contact, a request to suppress dashboard camera footage, a text message to the Voss Group's insurance liaison that instructed her to flag the claim as contested before Cal Merritt had even submitted an estimate. Elena read it twice. "Where did you get this?" she said. "Cal Merritt's attorney sent it to me this morning." Priya kept her voice level. Apparently, Marcus also contacted a journalist at the business desk. The angle he floated was that the accident was staged, that a contractor was attempting to exploit the near miss for a payday. Elena put the document down. Her hands were flat on the desk. "Cal Merritt is a handyman," Priya said carefully. "He has a 7-year-old daughter. He submitted a clean insurance claim for $800 in bumper repair. That's the entire scope of what he asked for." Elena was very still. "Marcus has done this before," Priya said. "I've been compiling the file for 2 years, waiting for the 3rd incident. This is the 3rd. She paused. "I need to know if you want to handle this internally or if you'd like me to initiate the board process." "Board process," Elena said. Her voice was even. "Today." Priya picked up the document. "There's one more thing." She set a second page on the desk. "The dashboard footage Marcus tried to suppress? The traffic management contact he called didn't pull it. He's one of the people who emailed me. He kept the footage and sent it directly to Cal Merritt's attorney instead." A beat. "I don't think Marcus understood how many people in this city have gotten tired of him." Elena looked at the second page. It was a still from the footage, her Audi, the Ford, the drop-off lane, the moment of impact visible in the frame. Unambiguous. She had never needed it suppressed. The accident was exactly what it appeared to be. An accident. "Elena," Priya's voice was careful. "Did you know what Marcus was doing?" Elena met her eyes. "No, but I knew the shape of it. I've always known the shape of it." A pause. "I let it be someone else's problem. That's not the same as not knowing." She pushed back from the desk. "Start the board process. And give me Cal Merritt's number. I have a call to make." Cal was on a ladder at a client's house, fixing a section of fascia board that had been separating from the roofline for 6 months. When his phone rang, he came down the ladder, saw the number, answered. "Mr. Merritt, this is Elena Voss." "Miss Voss?" He sat on the tailgate of his truck. "I want to apologize." Her voice had the particular quality of someone who had decided to say something difficult and was doing it without softening it into something else. "Not for the accident. I did that already. For what my chief of staff did afterward. I found out this morning. He attempted to suppress incident footage and mischaracterize your claim to a journalist. Neither of those things had my knowledge or authorization." A pause. "And I want to be honest with you. I didn't have his knowledge, but I had a general understanding of how he operated, and I allowed it because it was convenient. That's different from ignorance. I want you to know I understand that." Cal said nothing for a moment. "The board process against him started this morning," she said. "He'll be out of the Voss Group by end of week. Your legal fees and any associated costs from his interference will be covered in full. My counsel has already been in contact with your attorney." "I know," he said. "She called me." The estimate for the bumper? I assume it's been settled? Insurance approved it yesterday, before any of this. He paused. $840. I know. Another pause, different from the last one. Mr. Merritt, Cal, when I spoke to you in the parking lot, you didn't seem angry. I've been thinking about that since Tuesday. He looked at the fascia board he'd been working on. At the house, at the ordinary Thursday morning street. I had a 7-year-old in the car who was watching everything I did, he said. That changes the math. A beat. She told her class at show and tell? Elena said. Apparently in considerable detail. Her teacher sent me a note. He paused. She told them that a lady in a fancy car hit ours, and that I checked on the lady first, and that she thought that was good, but that she also thought the lady should have been paying more attention. Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she made a sound that might have been a laugh, a small, involuntary thing. She's not wrong. No, he said. She usually isn't. The line was quiet for a moment. I should let you get back to your work, Elena said. Thank you for handling this the way you did. You didn't have to. It didn't cost me anything, he said. That's not the same as generous. She thought about that for a moment. I suppose not. Another pause. Cal, would it be, I know this is an unusual request, but I'd like to apologize in person, not to fix anything. Just because I think it's the right thing to do. She paused. If you're willing. He looked at his ladder, at the fascia board, at the perfectly ordinary street. I'm at a job site until about 4, he said. I picked Nora up at 3:15. Of course. She didn't say I'll send someone or my assistant can coordinate. She said, is there a time after that that works for you? He thought about it. He thought about Nora's show and tell account, about the parking lot, about the particular quality of Elena Voss standing in a drop-off lane with her phone in her hand and no one to hand the moment to, asking if he was all right. Saturday morning, he said. We're usually at Ridgeline Park at 9. Nora likes the climbing structure. You could find us there if you wanted. A pause long enough that he thought she might be reconsidering. 9 o'clock, she said. I'll be there. By Friday afternoon, Marcus Hale had been escorted from the Voss Group offices with his personal items in a box and his access credentials suspended. The board's preliminary findings cited a pattern of conduct involving suppression of information, unauthorized interference with legal proceedings, and misrepresentation to media contacts. The full review would take several more weeks, but the outcome was not in question. His network reached out. Quietly, then less quietly. 2 former colleagues emailed with careful sympathy. 3 didn't reply to his messages. By Friday evening, the trade press had a brief item. Nothing front page, but sourced, specific, and from multiple directions. The kind of item that lives in search results for years. Marcus called Elena's direct line at 6 p.m. She did not answer. He called again at 6:45. She did not answer. Some calls don't get returned. Some distances, once made, stay made. Elena arrived at Ridgeline Park at 8:58. She had not known, when she said yes, what she was agreeing to. She thought she did, an apology, a brief conversation, closure on a week she wanted behind her. She'd worn sensible shoes, which felt like a significant concession from her normal Saturday. She'd taken her own car. She hadn't told anyone where she was going. She found them at the climbing structure. Cal was on a bench nearby with a coffee cup and a book he hadn't opened, watching Nora move through the structure with the focus of someone solving a problem that happened to involve a rope ladder and a platform 6 feet off the ground. Nora reached the top, turned and delivered a verdict to the surrounding air that Elena couldn't hear, but that made Cal smile without looking up. He heard her approach, looked up. "Miss Voss." "Elena." She sat at the other end of the bench. Left space, not because she needed distance, but because some spaces are earned rather than assumed. "Elena," he said. They were quiet for a moment. Nora had spotted her from the climbing structure. She descended with deliberate efficiency, crossed the gravel, and stopped in front of Elena. "You're the Audi lady," Nora said. "I am." "You hit our car." "I did. I'm sorry about that." Nora studied her with the calm assessment that Cal apparently came by honestly. "My dad checked on you first," she said, "before he looked at the cars." "I know." Elena looked at the girl. "That told me something about him." Nora seemed to find this answer satisfactory. She turned to her father. "I'm going back up." "Go ahead." She went. Elena watched her climb. "She's remarkable," Elena said. "She's mine," he said. "I'm probably not objective." "You don't have to be." Elena looked at the climbing structure, at Nora navigating the rope bridge with the methodical attention of someone who was aware it was an engineering problem, not a performance. "I wanted to apologize again. In person. For the accident, and for Marcus, and for... I've been thinking about what you said on the phone, that it didn't cost you anything. I've been thinking about that distinction." He looked at her. "I have a chief of staff. I had a chief of staff, whose entire value to me was that he made things not cost me anything," she said. "Problems disappeared. I didn't ask how. I told myself that was efficiency." She looked at the bench, then back up. "Standing in that parking lot on Tuesday, watching you photograph the damage and ask if I was okay. That was the least efficient response to a fender bender I've ever seen. And it was the most decent." Cal was quiet for a moment. "Nora watches everything," he said. "That's part of it. But I was a crisis counselor before this. You learn, doing that work, that the way you respond in the first 30 seconds of something tells people who you actually are. You can't fake it that fast." He looked at his hands. "I decided a long time ago I wanted to be the same person in the first 30 seconds as I am in the 31st. Elena was quiet. Across the structure, Nora had reached the platform at the top and was now sitting on it with the composure of a general surveying a field. "I haven't eaten breakfast sitting down on a weekday in 4 months, Elena said. She hadn't planned to say it. It came out the way things come out when you've been too busy to notice them until you're somewhere quiet enough to hear yourself. "I know that's a small thing." "It's not a small thing," he said. She looked at him. He was looking at the park, at Nora, at the trees, at the ordinary Saturday morning going about its business around them. "I don't really know how to not run at this speed," she said. "It's been 11 years since I started the company. I've forgotten what the other speed feels like." "It feels like sitting on a bench," he said, "while your kid climbs something." A pause. "That's it," she said. "That's most of it." He picked up his coffee cup. "The rest you figure out from there." They sat in silence for a while. It was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that had enough space in it for things to settle, which Elena had not experienced in a very long time, and which she found she did not want to rush. Nora came down from the platform at 9:30, covered in wood chip dust and satisfied with her work, and announced that she was hungry and that the morning had been productive. Cal looked at Elena. "There's a diner 2 blocks from here," he said. "They make actual breakfast, the kind you sit down for." He paused. You're welcome to join us. Not an obligation. Elena looked at Nora, who was brushing wood chips off her jacket with the matter-of-fact efficiency of someone who had accepted that certain consequences were built into certain decisions. She thought about her calendar, about the 11 hours she'd been running before the accident on Tuesday, about Marcus's box of personal items, about the text she'd sent Cal on Tuesday afternoon, wanted to check in. How was your daughter? And how long she'd stared at it before sending it. She thought about what it would cost her to sit down for an hour on a Saturday morning. I'd like that, she said. Nora looked at her father with the expression of someone whose theory had just been confirmed. I knew she'd say yes, Nora said. Cal gave her a look. You didn't know that? I was pretty sure, Nora said. She kept looking at your coffee like she wanted one. She walked ahead toward the park exit, not waiting for a response, because she had made her point, and breakfast was not getting any closer. Elena stood. Cal stood. They followed Nora across the park at the unhurried pace of two people who had arrived somewhere they hadn't planned on being, and found it, against all probability, exactly right. 3 weeks later, Elena Voss ate breakfast sitting down. Nora had insisted on making it. She had opinions about scrambled eggs that she'd been developing since Tuesday, and which she'd now synthesized into a method she called the correct way, which involved low heat and what Cal diplomatically described as a significant amount of patience. Elena sat at the kitchen table, a round one, old wood, the kind of table that had been in a family long enough to have the record of it in its surface, and watched a 7-year-old explain the structural integrity of eggs to her with the uncompromising authority of someone who had done extensive research. Cal sat across from Elena with his coffee, watching Nora, watching Elena watch Nora, not saying much. The Saturday morning went at its own pace around them, and nobody accelerated it. The eggs were, Elena had to admit, very good. She said so. Nora nodded once. I know, she said. That's what happens when you don't rush them. Cal looked at Elena over the rim of his coffee cup. A small thing, no more than a look, really. But it had a quality she'd been trying to name since the parking lot. Not amusement. Not attraction, exactly, though that was there too. Something more specific. Something that said, I see you. Not the version you run at full speed. The version that exists when the speed drops and there's a kitchen table and eggs made correctly and a Saturday that isn't going anywhere. The version that had been there all along, waiting for a Tuesday morning and a blind spot, and a man who asked if she was all right before he looked at the damage. She drank her coffee, ate her eggs, stayed at the table the whole time. It was, she realized, the best Tuesday consequence she'd ever had, even if it had taken a Saturday to fully arrive.